So as I was collecting these stories and doing this, I sort of got together with my editor and we started thinking the real way to get at the heart of how difficult this is, because you always say, oh, why did they make that mistake, would be for me to actually try to do it. So the parameters we set up were that I would try to disappear for a month, that I wouldn't actually try to go off the grid. I wouldn't go live in a tent in a national park because for a month it'd be pretty difficult for someone to find me. Now over a longer period of time, even that you could be found, but so I would actually try to adopt an entirely new identity, and I would try to use all of the technologies that I use now, including social networking, which I am a participant in, but as a new person. So I'd actually try to create a new identity and then jump into that identity and leave my old one behind. And then people could win $5,000 if they found me in person, took my picture, and said a code word, which was fluke, which was a reference to the guy from Arkansas who disappeared and took his dog with him, this dog named Fluke. He was discovered 8 months later with his dog and his wife and his kid. So those were kind of the general parameters. I would try not to break the law, just so we would avoid any legal trouble when I got back. And then other than that, we just sort of threw it open to whatever people would try to do. Now, we had to make it a little bit easier for the general public, because if an investigator was looking for you, they would have subpoenas, they could get access to your bank accounts, your email potentially. So instead, we would just release all of that. So my editor had passwords to everything, every part of my life. So frequent flyer accounts, bank accounts, credit cards, and he could reveal anything that he wanted to out of those. My phone records, who I'd called for the last month. So that's how we set it off. And then I took off from San Francisco, but actually before that, so what I had to do was I had to try to figure out what this new identity was going to be like, and how could I sever it from my old identity. So I adopted a new name, which was James Gatz, James Donald Gatz. Donald is actually my middle name, which was one of the kind of mistakes I made. It didn't end up costing me, but when people try to disappear, oftentimes they carry something over from their previous life, and that's the way they end up getting caught. They use the same birth date, or they'll transpose the numbers in their birth date or in their social security number. So using my middle name was a bad idea, but I adopted a new name. Part of the reason I adopted James Gatz is that it's a name that in The Great Gatsby, it's actually The Great Gatsby's original name before he changes it to Jay Gatsby. But it had a practical purpose too, which was if somebody Googled me, if I met someone and I told them my name and they Googled me, in the digital age, there's a little bit of an issue. If you have no presence online in a certain community of people, you are suspicious. And you'll read stories about people who go on dates, and the first thing they do when they go home from the date is they Google the person. So I wanted to have a reasonable excuse for why if someone Googled me, they couldn't find anything, because all they would find would be references to The Great Gatsby. So then I tried to develop these aspects of my identity, ways of using money. So these are gift cards that you pay cash for, and they're completely anonymous. And then you can register them online under a fake name, and then I used those cards to order another card online, which actually had my name on it. And it looks kind of like a credit card. I got the patriotic flag-waving one, and it says gift card in the corner, but most places, if I went and used it, they would treat it almost like a piece of ID. I had business cards, which were references to a company that I started called Bespect. Bespect Research, which I always describe as it's like respect with a B, which also doesn't mean anything. And then I mocked up a fake ID. Whoops, we lost our. We unplugged. There we go. Well, I had a fake ID. You may have seen it. It was actually like a university ID. I called myself a visiting scholar because creating a regular driver's license or passport would get me into legal problems. So I mostly tried to sort of stay within the parameters of this low-level ID. And then I would often tell a story that I had lost my driver's license, but I had this scholar's ID, and I had this credit card, and was that enough to get me by? And at most hotels, at most places where they kind of routinely ask for driver's license for no apparent reason, that was enough.
Do we need to do something?
Is this going to come back?
Okay.
So then I had the company that I had was actually registered in the state of New Mexico. It's a real company. It's called Bespect LLC. It's still registered. It's not registered to my name. And then I also wanted to separate everything from my old life to my new life. So I rented an office under a fake name, and then I had all my mail under my fake name show up at that office, including this gift card. I had it sent there because any mail that I had sent to my own address with the fake name creates a connection in a database somewhere between these two identities. So here you can see the website for my company. It had some fake projects that I had whole backstories for. I had a whole reason why I was sort of traveling around the country. I had a fake Twitter account, but this was me talking about my daily business as I went on this trip around the country. And at different points, I would make it public or make it private, depending on how paranoid I was that someone was following it. Sometimes I would seed it with false information if I thought people were paying attention to it. This is my Facebook page. And this was interesting because, if you or I sign up for Facebook, the way it usually works is somebody says, oh, you should sign up for Facebook. And then you connect with them, and then they know some of your friends, and you connect with them, and then pretty soon you have a network of your friends. You send them some invitations, maybe your family as well. But I was, as James Gatz, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone, and I didn't want to connect with anyone that I knew. So it created this dilemma of how do I manufacture friends out of nothing, and it turns out there are people on Facebook who will friend anyone. And most of them are multi-level marketing gurus and real estate people. So I would find people who had 900, 1,000, 2,000 friends, and I would send them requests. And pretty soon I built up a pretty good collection of friends. A lot of these are from after, but I had 30, 40 friends, none of whom I actually knew, none of whom knew me. But if someone looked me up, and oftentimes I would say, oh, look me up on Facebook. And it created this perception that I was a real person. Like, who would concoct this entire identity with business cards? And it just gave an authenticity. So it was kind of looking at both sides of this question, that people could use my old information to track me, but I could also use the whole idea of digital identity to develop this new person who would have a backstory because he existed online. So then I'll just go through this quickly because it gets a little technical, but basically the one big problem I had is I was staying online. I had to show that I was online, so I would log into my email every day, my real email. And if any of you use Gmail, you may or may not have ever noticed, but in a tiny, tiny font at the bottom of the screen, it says last logged in from, and it has your IP address. And actually, if you click further, it has your last 5 IP addresses. It's basically recording every computer that you've logged in from. And your computer has an IP address when it attaches to the internet, and that IP address correlates to your physical location. And I'll talk about it in a little minute, but you can use the IP address to locate not just someone where someone is generally, but their specific address. So I had to do something to conceal my IP address to show that I wasn't where I was in terms of the IP address. So I used something called Tor, which is a piece of software that it's designed for whistleblowers and dissidents to use, so they can mask, where information is coming from. It's been in the news a lot lately. If you follow the news about WikiLeaks, this website, they have a lot of interaction with Tor. So basically, Tor masks how you access the internet. So if I'm Alice, I'm trying to get something off of Bob's web server. Tor makes it look like I'm jumping from that last computer to Bob's server. And basically, all these hops in between are anonymous. So if Bob is there and he's saying, oh, who's accessing my server, it might look like it was coming from Germany, when in fact I was in Los Angeles. But then I had a friend who worked at Google who said, you know what, Tor can be cracked. Anything can be cracked. So that's not safe enough. So instead what I did was I took these 2 computers and I left them in an anonymous office that I rented in Las Vegas, which is this windowless room. And I set the computers up, I attached them to the internet. I rented the office for the entire month. And then what I did when I wanted to access the internet was I actually remotely logged into these computers. I used these computers to access the internet. And then if someone ever traced my IP back, they would only get as far as Las Vegas. And in fact, later on they did. So I set off around the country. I started in San Francisco. I drove to Vegas. I set up my computers. Then I sold my car. I started taking other forms of transportation. I went to LA, and then I got online and hitched a ride with a band, a small indie band who was touring across the country. So I went from LA, and they kind of cruised across Texas, and I was sort of just riding along in their van, helping them pay for gas, and basically they kind of left me alone. And then I ended up, this map is actually made by someone who was chasing me. It's not entirely accurate, but essentially I went to St. Louis with the band. I took a train down to New Orleans, and then I rented an office in New Orleans, and I rented it under a fake name. I signed a lease. And I would do things like I had anonymous PayPal accounts, or not anonymous, but attached to my fake name. And I would contact the landlord over the internet and ask them if they took PayPal. So sometimes I rent an apartment for a week, and I never even saw the landlord. He just left me a key in a box. I paid him with PayPal. As far as he knew, I was James Gatz, and as long as I paid the bill, he didn't care. So then the other dilemma I had was my pictures were in the magazine, and not only in the magazine, but every day Wired was publishing more and more pictures. I had given them essentially a dossier of information about me, this same kind of thing that an investigator would uncover if they spent some time interviewing my family and things like that. So I had to kind of disguise my physical appearance because I didn't know if anyone I had encountered along the way might have seen the magazine, and anyone could catch me. So all they had to do was have seen the magazine, know the code word, and take my picture. So I wanted to do a little bit to mask my physical appearance. So at first I grew out this kind of like scraggly beard. This is the first day. Then I shifted towards, this is my Las Vegas look. So these are fake glasses, and I dyed my hair, and I dyed the goatee as well, and I kind of slicked it back. And I had, this is from the end, and it's you can't see it that well, but I had 4 pairs of fake glasses, sunglasses. I had multiple different kinds of contacts, hats, all this stuff I was kind of carrying with me, along with enough digital gear to kind of stock a Radio Shack, basically. I had throwaway phones. I had different ways to access the internet, and all this stuff I was sort of carrying along with me. So then here I am in Los Angeles, and I actually got into a man on the street video. And at the time, swine flu there was a big swine flu scare, and there was a woman who does an online news report who was going around Venice Beach asking people, what do you think about swine flu? And I thought, well, this will be a really funny thing for me to get into, and then later I can say, see, I wasn't hiding out from the world. Here I was. I was on Venice Beach. Not only that, but I was in this video, and this video was published online, and she has a lot of fans. I was out there to be found. So then this is me in New Orleans. I've got my hat. I've washed out the dye by this point. And then I started building up a lot of paranoia, even starting in LA. In fact, one of the things that's in the final story is that I actually ran from a helicopter one day on Venice Beach because I had used my ATM card to deposit the check from my selling the car, because this was like a cashier's check, and I didn't want to lose it. It was $3,000, which it's not something you want to just not be careful with. So I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and deposit this. I was leaving LA anyway. I don't care if they know that I've used this ATM. But then I couldn't get out as quickly as I wanted to. I couldn't get my ride out of LA. So basically one morning I was out on the beach. There was a helicopter. It was kind of hovering over me. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then I kind of moved down the beach, and it kind of moved down the beach. And I thought, well, there's nothing else going on this beach. It was 6 in the morning. I was out for a jog. There were a few surfers out. And then I thought, you know what? Someone has seen this ATM thing. They've posted it online, and they've gotten a friend who has a helicopter, and they're coming out to get me, because for $5,000, you pay the friends a few hundred for using the helicopter, and you're still making good money.